great comedians are often people who know great sorrow in their personal lives. One of the great comedians of our day is the former goon Michael Bentine, a strange vocation for a man who claims to have seen right into hell during the Second World War while he served with the Royal Air Force, once they let him in.
It took me 14 volunteerings to get into the RAF. And I only finally got in because I was arrested as a deserter.
That's right. Now tell us about that, because you were actually taken off the stage.
It was very strange because I hadn't been in. And I'd been trying to get in ever since '39. Tony, my brother, was in the HAC, Honourable Artillery Company. And I was just about to go on stage in my doublet and hose.
Was this Shakespeare?
Shakespeare, yes. I was playing Lorenzo in The Merchant of Venice. And this chap with the flat hat came in and he said, Mr. Michael Bentine? So I said, yes, thinking, oh, at last, you're great, wonderful. He said, you're 65 days adrift, AWOL, you're a deserter. And Robert said, how can he be a deserter? He's trying to get in the RAF, I'm trying to get out. And then this idiot said, take your sword, Fred, you might do yourself a mischief. Tin sword. And they wouldn't let me change in case I did a moonlight through the toilet window. So with my trench coat over my shoulders and a pulled-up-in hose, I turned up at the DAPM's office, Deputy Assistant Provost Marshal, and was put in a cell. So I reacted. I just clung onto the bars and said, "Yo no hablé una palabra de inglés, solamente castellano." He said, "What did you say?" I said, "I don't speak any English. I only speak Castilian Spanish," which I spoke very badly. He said, "You're bluffing." So I said, "Well, you find my papers if they're there." And he got the papers, and he said the immortal lines, "God almighty, Fred, he really is a bloody wogue," which I have never forgotten. He's obviously in the diplomatic corps now. And anyway, I was carted off, and the ambassador came, who was my godfather, one of my proving godfather. And he said, "¿Qué pasa, Miguel?" So I told him. He was furious, and he said, "Not one British ship into the port of Callao will go until the honor of this young man has been vindicated." So they vindicated my honor, and the next thing I knew, I was invited to meet A.A.H. Gilligan, the cricketer, my great hero, because I was cricketer. And he said, "We're awfully sorry. We really are terribly sorry." He was then a group captain in charge of Aircrew Reception Centre, which is where I should have gone. And he said, I said, "One thing I must know, when you were at Eton, where you were, dry bob, did I play cricket?" I said, "Yes, sir." "Bowler?" So I said, "Yes, sir." "What sort?" I said, "Medium paced in-swingers." He said, "Yes." "Can you bowl the Chinaman?" I said, "You mean the googly sayer, 6 times out of 6. He said, "We must have you in the RAF." Now, I could have been Hitler's illegitimate son. So long as I was a medium-paced in-swing, I was in. And from then on, all the obstacles were removed, and I was in the RAF. Then they nearly killed me. They gave me an injection, a booster injection, before going to Canada. I think we must have been going to Canada because they issued us with tropical kit.
That sounds right.
To fool the Hun, you see. And we were lined up getting the jabs, the boosters. And I saw the medical orderly change the bottle. And he gave the last 3 of us on the flight. And within 6 hours, one was dead. I was in convulsions, and the other chap was paralyzed for life, more or less. He was invalided out. It took me 6 months to get back on my feet. I was blind for several weeks. And then they said, "Well, I'm afraid that's the end of your aircrew training." And I said, "Well, that's jolly nice. It only took me 14 months to get in, and it nearly killed me." Because I've always been under the impression that most of the medical officers were working for the Luftwaffe. However, I said, "Well, can't I do something?" And they said, "Wait a minute. You've got languages." So I said, yes. "Which one?" "Well, French and Spanish." They said, "Wonderful," and put me with the Poles. So that was the start. And I was commissioned at Cosford. And then I had that wonderful man, Airy Neve, gave us the intelligence course at the Towers Highgate, where I met all sorts of strange people, including professional spies and amateur spies and resistance workers and all people who'd got out of the hands of the Nazis. And I learnt to teach the techniques for evasion, because your chances of getting out if you were an escaper were pretty low. Airy Neve did a home run, as you know, from Colditz, one of the very few people to get out of that Straflager. Your biggest chance was if you could hide up after you'd made the parachutage or the atterrissage d'emergence, an emergency landing, and then hide in a wood and then pick somebody who was isolated and go up to him and say, look, I'm a British airman and I need help. And sometimes he just turned you straight in. But mainly, especially if you were in Belgium or in France, the resistance was just wonderful.
Let's talk about what happened after you left the Air Force and the birth of the Goons. I mean, where did the Goons spring from?
They sprang from the war. We were 6 servicemen. There were really four goons, which was Harry and Spike and Peter and myself. And we'd all met through the windmill. The word goon comes from an Edgar Segar cartoon. You know, he did the Popeye cartoons.
Yes.
And the goons were hairy creatures that talked in sound waves. And they were really ohm signs, you know, what-no signs, sign of an ohm.
Yes.
And so we used the traditional goon voice, which is Goofy, which was Ralph Wright's voice from Walt Disney's Goofy. And oh, how the bell in the old tower rings. That type of voice. And that became Eccles. And it really grew from having a lot of fun after hours in the pub. Mm. And we got together, and a lovely man called Pat Dixon came down and listened to us and said, I think I'd make great radio. And he was the fostering father. The BBC hated us. One chap said to me, he said, I don't like the go-on show at all.
The go-on show?
Yes, the go-on show. He said, it's iconoclastic, and it's disestablishmentarianism in its worst form. And he'd managed to dodge the column during the war. It was at a time when you couldn't say ruddy on the air. I mean, I was up once for saying it. Murders in all directions. That was what it was all about. We were all ex-servicemen who couldn't believe we'd survived the war. And all that ebullience came from it. It was always very good-natured ebullience, and it was always against authority. But it wasn't hate-filled. It was filled with affection and love and quite ridiculous, and I loved it. And I loved the people concerned.
A lot of kind of highbrow critics have since very solemnly read all sorts of abstract philosophizing into the thing, but in fact you were just having a good time.
The happiest times I think any of us had was really in that, as individual men, as opposed to family men, something that our families might even have been slightly jealous of. Mm. The fact that we did have this extraordinary relationship of folly, and now we will meet. And there's no formality. It's, hey, well, and we're off. And we're talking gibberish, but it's all mutually shared memories, all the madness. Mm-hmm. And especially the fact that we were them. It's us against them, or them against us, whichever you like. Mm. It was a great experience, good fun.
Is it too solemn to see some kind of connection between this ability to make people laugh, this desire to make people laugh, and what a Spanish philosopher called the tragic sense of life? Because you've had that as well.
Yes, we had quite a basin of that, haven't we? Yes, my whole family's had that. No, I think by the time I was 24, I'd probably seen some of the most ghastly sights that anybody can ever experience. But then a lot of soldiers went through that, and airmen, and of course in the Navy and what have you, and in the Luftwaffe and the Russian army and everything else. Because it was an appalling war, it was a dreadful war. I think it was a reaction against that. I think humour got us through it. I always remember we were getting a terrible stonk going up, getting stuff coming in, going up through Germany, and I thought my last hour had come because I wasn't really trained for that. I was trained for something else. And wriggling across the grass came my batman, who's an awfully nice chap called Albert, and he said, I brought you a cup of tea, so I thought you might like. But there's all this hell going on in all directions, and I thought, now there's somebody that really should be given the reward of heaven.
Yes. That's actually very British too.
Yes. Yes, I think the connection is that the reaction of humour is the defence mechanism against some of the appalling sides of life. Mm-hmm.
You were at Belsen at the end of the war, weren't
Yes,
you?
I was.
After the war was over?
Yes. Mm. No, it was still on. It was still on when we liberated Belsen. We arrived at Celle. It must have been... yes, pretty near the end of the war. We were operating there for about a fortnight when the ceasefire came through at about 1 a.m. in the morning. And we'd been there about 24 hours, no longer than that. And while we were there, this jock doctor came down the road, and he said, has anybody got any medical knowledge? And I'd had a bit of St. John's ambulance training in which I'd nearly killed an admiral. And I said, well, I'm willing to help. And we went up the road, and he was very silent. And I thought, oh dear, this chap's in shock. And course, when I saw it, I knew why. I looked upon the open face of hell. I've never
But
been
hadn't
so
you
shattered by
sensed
anything.
its presence? Wasn't there an occasion when you were lost and you somehow
No, that was
sensed...
many years later.
That was many years later.
But, I mean, you could feel something awful odd. But then, you see, you were surrounded by death. I'd been surrounded by death since the Rhine crossing. I've been in death situations many times during the war, but I had never seen it en masse. Yes, it really was dreadful.
One of the things that must have been particularly difficult for you is that you are psychic and were throughout this horrid human conflict. And so you must have been more sensitive to impending tragedy, probably even precognizing things
Yes,
on occasions.
I think most children can do that. I think it's why children are so immensely sensitive. It's really, once again, the survival antennae coming out. I think most children have it. I think it's kicked out of them. With my father, it was encouraged with me. He developed it. I was one of his guinea pigs.
Now, I can understand that. I suppose most people could, but you've also had experiences of future states. You've somehow anticipated
have.
things.
Yes.
How do you explain that?
Well, I believe it was Goethe who originally said it. Coming events cast their shadows before them. If you can imagine you're on the banks of a large lake, and the lake travels over the horizon, and a stone falls, a large rock or landslide goes into the lake out of sight. The waves that come over it indicate to you some event. But if you can imagine that this is the present and that is the future, that is the sort of precognitive glimpse, flash of intuition, whatever you like to call it. I knew my son would die and the boy with him if they flew together, whereas I hadn't the slightest objection to them going scuba diving together. And that all happened in one dreadful flash of intuition while we were falling about laughing in the other room. And I warned him about it. And
You actually saw him dead.
no, I saw an aeroplane, a light aeroplane, I'm very familiar with aeroplanes, remember, rear up and disappear into a wooded horizon. No fire, which is odd with an aeroplane when it crashes. And I picked up that he would be in it and the boy would be in it with him. I mean, they're both good friends, about the same age. I think Andy was probably a year or two older. Very good pilot. Not all that experienced, but a good pilot, very safe pilot. It was just a question of the meeting of two world lines. If that happened, they would both be dead. And I told him that, whereas I never go around warning my family or children other than say, be careful in the car or something. And in that case, it proved most horribly true.
These precognitions, are they absolutely deterministic? I mean, do you see something that is going to happen, or is there some way, could your son have done anything other than in fact he did?
Yes, oh, we're not talking about predetermination, we're talking about a glimpse of a probability factor. Having been given the glimpse of the probability factor, it's a warning.
But
you can then get on with it.
How many experiences have you had of this sort in your life, these sort of moments of precognition, of actually seeing what was coming?
Virtually hundreds, I would have thought.
Really?
In a minor way,
Yeah.
and in a major way, probably a dozen. I mean, a dozen major ones that affected my life totally.
How many of them have been tragic?
Not a great deal, because I deliberately wipe out that sort of level. You'll find a lot of people, when they're developing mediumship, come up against this big doom and gloom. I remember one lady came to see us, and I don't think any of us were going to survive longer than a week. The dog would probably last about a year, and all she saw was death and destruction in all directions. It's very easy to think negative. You tune into a certain plane of consciousness, of the human collective unconscious. There's plenty of death and destruction going around, you'll pick it up. And then you see nothing but death and destruction.
Now, what about your family? When did you get married?
I was married the first time in 1942. 41 or 42, I can't even remember now. And that was to a very nice French girl who was in French intelligence, and I was with British intelligence, 43. So as our commanding officers wouldn't even talk to each other, that didn't have much of a chance. And we had this wonderful daughter, who has since passed over when she was 41, most adorable girl, whom I didn't see from the age of about 3 until she was about 17. And we just took off where we'd left off. And we had a marvelous relationship. She's a lovely girl. Love her very much, very much. And then I was married the second time in 1948, I think it was. I'm not very good on
To a
dates.
Scottish ballerina?
To a Scottish ballerina who had, I think, never seen Scotland, though her family very much came from Scotland. Her mother, though, was a Gateston. She came from Dorset. Clementina's real name was Stuart McCall. Clementina Gadsden Stuart McCall. And my father-in-law was a marvellous man whom I adored. A great tall Scot, with a very beautiful voice, very modulated, who I remember once we were walking through Piccadilly and right through the back streets of the Palladium, and all the various ladies of easy virtue said, "Hello, Mike! Hello, Mike! Hello, Mike!" Because I used to play the nightclub, so you would know them because they used to bring the client in, you see, out of the rain. And they all knew my act and liked it. "Hello, Mike! Hello, Mike!" All the barrow boys said, "Hello, mate, all right then, doing all right at Palladium." And he said, "You have a most interesting coterie of friends." He's a lovely man, I loved him.
Michael, you've had an incredible amount of tragedy in your life. You've lost 3 children?
Well, I've had 5 children. I have 2 surviving children, physically surviving.
Mm-hmm.
I believe I have 3 others who are still surviving.
At what ages were your children when they died?
My son was 21. He was killed in an aeroplane. I then lost my eldest daughter, Elaine, whom I adored, and she died of cancer. And there was bitterness there because the most wonderful hospital, the Marsden, who looked after, I mean, they really were angels. They really were wonderful there. And they didn't have a CAT scanner. And I went to all the political parties. I asked friends throughout the political spectrum during an election, and I remember one of them saying to me, "My dear Michael, you can't expect sense from us during an election. Well, when else are you going to get it?" You know, and I was very bitter about the fact that I had to go on the air in 21 different broadcasts in order to get the money in, because the hospital asked me, and the last thing that my daughter Elaine said to me was, "Daddy, please get them a CAT scanner. They need it." We got them the CAT scanner. I think we raised £850,000 in about 4 months.
At what age was she when
She was
died?
41. She was my eldest. And then 2 or 3 years later, my next eldest, who was Fusty, who I also adored, a lovely girl, she was smitten with cancer. And she put up a terrific fight as well, and sadly lost the fight. And, you know, I've never seen a whole ward weep before. I saw it with Elaine. I saw the ward weep for Fusty, because they loved them both so much. And I'm immensely proud of them. And I carry that image. It's a great comfort, because they're super girls. And if I want to tune in to see them in my own mind, I just think of either of them and they're there. It's a lovely feeling.
You weren't tempted to the sort of why me bitterness type of scenario?
No, I think it's a very negative type of scenario, very negative type of attitude, and was against all my teaching as a child. No, the best thing I can recommend is anybody faced with this type of dreadful situation is to get rid of your grief as fast as you can. Get it out of you. Howl like a dog. Don't bother about it. Go somewhere quietly and howl it out of you. Get rid of the shock and then sleep, then come back and try and help all the other people who are grieving and make cups of tea and help them positively and try to adopt a positive attitude to survival. Whether you feel it's a self-delusion or not, it's a very good attitude to take. And, you know, don't shut your mind to your dead. Think of them. I wonder how they're getting on. I wonder how they'll enter your mind again. It's a marvelous feeling. Not with, at first, that can be quite a difficult thing to do, but later you'll find it's of great comfort.
You tune in quite a lot to all sorts of things. Have you had any, what Wordsworth would call intimations of immortality? You know, his famous poem. He talks about children being brought in trailing clouds of glory with a sense of the other world, which they gradually lose as life thickens around them and the shades of the prison house close around them. You know, it's an incredible thing.
Yes.
Do you occasionally have intimations of another reality that encompasses this one and gives meaning to it?
I think I see it many times in a sunset, in a sunrise, in a storm, in the sea. I'm a very keen sailor and have been for years, ever since I sailed in dinghies. And sometimes I've been praying on the cabin soul as a great gale came out of the west like a galloping stallion. At other times the sea has a sense of peace that literally passes all understanding. And I think I've seen heaven and hell on this earth because you transcend the earth. It's a mental state. It's a state of consciousness. To me, heaven is a state of consciousness.
But is there a presence for you in heaven other than the collective totality of all human consciousnesses?
Yes, it's total love. It's a feeling of love. Love is the most encompassing, comforting, It's like being in the perfect womb, which is, I think, why the Virgin Mary is the symbol. It's the womb of love. It's total comfort. It's
But that's
what
still
child goes back to.
that's still a bit abstract and general. Love, womb. Do you have any convictions about the reality of a personal God, the mystery that is behind creation being itself personal and able to relate to us?
Yes, I have a very personal God, but God is love to me. That's what it's about. If you're into that wavelength, then you are communicating with God. That's why it's an all-pervading thing. And it can manifest in an animal or a baby or a child laughing or a beautiful woman or a beautiful old person or a beautiful tree or a beautiful insect or a beautiful anything, a beautiful day, beautiful flower.
But have you
The
ever...
awareness of it is love.
Yeah. Have you ever had a kind of moment when time stood still?
Oh, yes,
Tell us.
very much so. Well, when I died the first time, I definitely fainted. It was agonizing. I can't tell you how painful it was. And the relief, for instance, I thought, my God, I'm dead. And I had darkness below me, but not frightening darkness. I was suspended in space-time. And I had light around me. Wonderful feeling of light. And a feeling of release and a feeling of love. There was no fear, just awe, but not fear. And then I was pulled back out of it. I was waiting for somebody. The second time was after double pneumonia and erythromycin, which went wrong. And they lost me again. They pulled me back. In this case, again, the light. And then being pulled back, again, waiting for somebody. I know that when I go, I shall have somebody there. I know that.
Michael, what do you think happens after death?
I think just continuity. There may be a period of unconsciousness, the same as waking from a dream. You know, the Australian Aborigines refer to this as the dream life, and the time when we were asleep as the real life, because you're in a timeless situation there, yet it's absolutely real. I feel much the same. I think you continue the dream, if you like.
And you move into a more advanced state. I mean, do you have however interpreted some kind of concept of heaven?
No, heaven is a state of mind for me. I don't think of it as an actual physical place. But then in a dream, everything is real. You can live in hell in a dream, a nightmare, or you can live in heaven in a dream, where you meet in the dream all the people that you've known and loved, who have passed on, if you like. That, to me, is what it's all about. Firstly, I think there are animals in it, because I always have animals in my dreams, because I'm very fond of animals, especially dogs. And I think that one also, if one's had a degree of dislike, sometimes hate, but normally it's intense dislike or unease with somebody, you meet them in a dream and you've lost that, and that's a wonderful feeling, because you feel, oh good, that's marvelous, that's how it should be. Yeah, I think there's love in a dream. I think it's the most important thing. That's a heavenly dream to me, is a dream in which there's love. There are children, there's laughter, there's a lot of laughter, there's no suffering, no grief, and once again, a glimpse or a meeting with people that you've lost physically during your life.
So there will be reunion with those that, in Newman's great hymn, you've loved long since but lost a while.
Yes, but that also applies to my dogs too. I should probably knock flat instantly.
Apart from your own immediate family, whom would you like to meet when you kind of step over onto the other side, especially that you haven't known on Earth?
Oh, golly Moses, it's a difficult one. Says, I'd love to meet Leonardo da Vinci. I'd love him to teach me mirror writing.
Mirror writing?
He was very good at that. He wrote everything in mirror writing. So you have to hold it up to a mirror. Yes, he was very clever. I'd love to meet Albert Einstein, as opposed to when a child. You know. I think that would be a wonderful experience because Einstein was this wonderful figure that my father told me about. I'd love to meet Nikola Tesla, who was the same sort of genius in electrical engineering that Einstein was in physics. There are many people I'd love to meet.
Can people on the other side of death communicate with us here in life? And if so, how is that done? I
have an enormous number of experiences that were told me during the war in which a warning would be given by a dead mother or father or loved sister or loved wife or whatever it was to an agent in our resistance movements, who would then just go straight out the back window, and sure enough, within minutes the Gestapo would be there, or the Abwehr would be there, followed by the Gestapo. There seemed to be a large number of warnings given in that way. There have been a tremendous number of instances where grandparent will appear to the grandchild. That's all a form of communication. You could call it self-delusion, but then how would the grandchild then know that the grandparent had died, grandfather or grandmother, and ring up, and sure enough, at that moment, that particular member of the family has passed on. Equally, I've known people who have lost a child, and the child has come back. If it is a self-delusion, it's a beautiful self-delusion. I'm certainly not going to give it up. I remember that Fusty, my late daughter, who's recently passed over, told me that when Gus was killed in the airplane, he first came back to her and stood beside her bed. She woke up, and she was very nervous of that sort of thing. But there he was, but not as himself. He was there as a boy. And, you know, so that he was even about this size and grinning at her. And she said, before I could go, I think he had gone.
What kind of religious training did you have in the family? I mean, how did you take to sort of Etonian Anglicanism? Was it very strange to you? Were you used to it?
No. I see nothing in the Bible that is against what I had experienced as a child. I seem to remember that in the New Testament, Jesus says, these things and more or greater things shall ye do, according to the translation. He also says, your young men will
dream dreams,
or
your old men will see visions.
See visions, one or the other. Go forth and do likewise, but do it in my name. Where two or three are gathered together in my name, I shall be there. I make certain that anything that I'm involved in, that proviso is there. But I'm a Judeo-Christian. I think you cannot take the Old Testament. You can't take the New Testament without the Old Testament. You must know about the Old
Jesus
Testament.
was a Jew.
Oh, and a very fine Jew, too.
Yeah.
A very fine Jew.
In all spiritual traditions and scriptures, there's a struggle going on between light and darkness, good and evil.
Yes.
And you've been involved in your own way in that struggle. Do you believe in the objectivity of evil in an ultimate sense, or is it simply emptiness? Is it simply a kind of moral black hole? Do you believe in hell?
Oh, yes. I've seen hell on earth. I've seen hell. I've been through hell. I know what hell feels like. Total despair. Total feeling of being disorientated from everything. You're totally alone. Totally alone, in total fear, in total remorse, total everything that you could think of.
Now, where did those things
Well, I think that
happen?
was, I used to have nightmares after the Belsen experience.
Oh, yes.
Because when I saw that, I looked on the face of hell, and I realized what the Nazis were, and that must never happen again. Ever, 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 ever.
Do you think that there are other ranks of being other than the human and the animal? I mean, do you believe in
Coexistent.
angelic beings, for instance? Do you believe that there are discarnate realities, intelligences? I mean, there's a lot about angelic reality in most of the world's sacred scriptures.
Yes, indeed. I certainly believe in the Lord Buddha. He's a historical figure. Jesus is certainly a historical figure. I believe in the existence of Jesus Christ. I think what he taught makes such wonderful sense that it's well worth following. I believe there was a chap called Moses, and I believe that he was a prince of the house of Egypt.
But these
and
were all
he did good things too.
These were historic figures. What about the cherubim, the seraphim, and all those ranks that are carefully codified in sacred scriptures?
The archetypes.
They for you are the archetypes.
Yes, they are the archetypes of good or the archetypes of evil. As this extraordinary Lama said to my friend Colin Bloy, he's a very wise man, he said, all the angels, all the demons are inside us, and it's entirely up to us how they manifest through us.
Are holy places important to you?
Yes. Yes, but they can be a pagan place. Most Christian churches, I think all of them, are built on what were pagan sites. Pagan sites are centers of power. They're over a well or a spring or a fountain or huge mineral mass or lodestone or something of that ilk. They have been worshipped there for many years, so They're charged up. You can feel it when you walk in.
Yes, when Pope Gregory sent the first missionaries to England, he told them to build their churches on the pagan holy places.
He did indeed. He knew exactly what he was talking about. Stonehenge was built for light. It's been there a long time. I think they dated it 2,350 years before Christ. It's been rebuilt about 3 or 4 times. Avebury the same. They're temples of the light. Iona, wonderful place. Oh, Iona. And the Ring of Brognan and all these wonderful
Yes.
places. Wales is full of such places.
Yes.
Welsh are extremely spiritual people, so are the Scots.
Oh, yes, yes.
And the Irish. It's
And there's still a lot of this
frightening.
consciousness that you talk about
Yes.
in the West Highlands. My mother was
Oh, yes, yes.
moderately psychic. She had
Yes.
certainly had the second sight. You could certainly tell
Yes.
when I was ill at a great distance she had.
Oh, yes.
And there's quite a lot of that still around there. So those places that Eliot described as being at the world's end
Yes.
can still communicate spiritual power and reality to people.
Well, you'll certainly find it in the Andes. Machu Picchu, in spite of its touristic surroundings now, has still got it. Ollantaytambo has it. I found places up there where there are huacas, which is a sacred place. Flying of an Nazca, you can feel it. Arequipa has it. The Pachacamac is loaded with it. They're great. I feel my whole ancestry turned there with it.
So
They were sun worshippers, remember.
you're very sensitive to that. Do you have a need for worship?
Oh, yes.
Does it have a place in your life?
Yes, very much so. I don't just pray for something. I give prayers of thanks. I say, thank you very much. Oh, it was lovely. But I'll go and walk in a forest or go out in a storm or whatever if I feel that that's how I want to communicate. I don't have to go into a church to do it or a cathedral.
But do you go to religious services occasionally?
To marriages, yes. To baptisms, yes. To bar mitzvahs, yes. I hate going to funerals.
But you're going to be at your own.
My
your
own
own
funeral?
funeral.
Well, I'd certainly be at my own
Have you
funeral.
made any
yes.
plans for that?
At my own funeral?
Yes, have you got anything you
No,
want done?
I don't think so. No, I think cremated as rapidly as possible.
You don't have
Perhaps
any
scattered over a garden and do it some good. Yes.
no
No.
particular readings you want?
I don't think so. I think Canon Holland is perhaps the best reading.
Oh, that you've only
Think of
gone
me
for
in the
yes,
next room.
that's almost top of the pops now in the crematoria.
That's the
I
smacker.
understand,
Yes, I love that one.
Yes.
And I
Yeah.
love High Flight, which was written by young McGee.
Don't know that.
The last line is, stretched out my hand and touched the hand of God.
Mhm.
He's just a young pilot who was killed in the last war.
Mhm.
He was Canadian. He's a fine poet. It's probably one of the most beautiful poems ever written. We had it at my son's memorial service.
Mm.
It's a beautiful poem.
Well, I hope it won't be for a very long time.
Well,
Michael Bentine.
whether it means a short time or a long time,
Yeah.
I think that we make a mistake by thinking too much about it. An animal doesn't think about it until it happens, and then it accepts it. All the great natural peoples of the earth, the Aborigines, the Mountain Indian, Jungle Indians, or African, what have you, North American Indian, Maoris, what have you, they all accept it as part of life. To them, it isn't an end. It's just a continuing path. if
But
you
their
like.
rites of departure are very, very important to them.
Oh, yes, indeed, yes. But that's for the living.
So I hope we give you a good funeral when it's all done.
A good send-off.
You're not going to spring any jokes, are you?
No, I don't think so. I find very little humour in death.
Yeah.
But then I don't look upon it as anything more than a beginning.